We're live. Okay. Who wants to give the prayer?
I can do that.
Okay.
Heavenly Father, we're thankful for the opportunity we have to get together this morning and complete our homework. And please bless us that as we talk, we'll be able to remember the things we've studied and to contribute to the discussion. And we're thankful for the gospel and for this school that we have to attend. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I'll share a quick spiritual thought quote from President Hinckley. He said, this is just on, I found someone posted on Facebook. Being humble means recognizing that we are not on earth to see how important we can become, but to see how much difference we can make in the lives of others. There you go. Okay, so should we jump in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let me get there real quick. Prepare your group discussion by answering the following questions. Why is Brentwood considering an IPO for Zoe's Kitchen at this time? What does Brentwood hope to gain from this, and provide some thorough analysis using evidence in the case study? Okay, so let's start with the why. Why are they considering an IPO at this time?
I think you're looking at the prep assignment. Those are the prep assignment questions.
Oh, sorry. Let me go to the next one here. Okay, opening prayer, spiritual thought, done. Okay, put yourself in the shoes of Brentwood Associate Management. You must decide whether or not you will exit Zoe's Kitchen now, and if so, what will be the best exit option. As a group vote, which should Brentwood do with Zoe's Kitchen? IPO now, sell to strategic buyer, or wait and grow till the business is more valuable? So
I think after reading the pros and cons of each one, if I was in his shoes, I think I would wait a couple more years to let Zoe's grow. And that way, I think it's more appealing to those buyers and also to the public.
Yeah, I would say the middle one is the worst option. I think IPO now or wait and do an IPO later is either of those is a good option. It seemed like there was pretty strong interest from like institutional investors that they were excited at the IPO opportunity. So if they did IPO now, it seemed like they were gonna be able to do okay. And certainly based on their trajectory, it seems like waiting to do it later was also an acceptable option because they had a GE Capital giving them $10 million note. They had pretty healthy balance sheet. They were heading in the right direction. So if they waited, I mean, there really wasn't any. I guess the only downside to waiting though is that they don't go through a 2008 kind of thing, or they can have a E. coli type issue that Chipotle did and get hammered or something. But I mean, barring anything unforeseen, it seems like waiting would be okay as well.
Yeah. One of the main reasons they wanted to do the IPO in the first place was just because that market said it was hot, and like Noodles and Company just gone public and they had a lot of success. And one of their concerns was that they didn't know, just because of the lengthiness of the process, if the market would still be hot. And so for that reason, I think it would be a good idea to wait, because that would really suck if they decided to do it and by the time they were all done with the process and ready to go, that market wasn't doing as well. So I think it'd be a good idea to wait and grow the business some more.
Okay. So you would two votes for wait. What about you, Sarah?
Could either sell to a buyer or wait.
Okay.
A lot of doubts about the IPO, and if it didn't go as well as they thought, downsides to trying it. Had some offers that looked good from a buyer.
Okay. All right. Very good. The reason I didn't like the strategic buyer route is I felt like if they sold it to another investment firm, that other investment firm could just turn around down the road and do an IPO as well, and they would basically be capturing more of the, I don't know. I didn't like that option as much, but waiting and growing was fine. It certainly seemed like they had a lot of resources to. Usually, companies go IPO when they need to raise a bunch of capital, but they seemed like they had pretty good cash. They didn't need it. They didn't need it to grow and expand because they had a pretty healthy balance sheet. Okay, so wait and grow is going to be what the majority is. As a group, allow each individual to state his or her position. If you all agree at the outset, take a counter position and explore why you should consider other options. Why does Brentwood want to exit now? What are some reasons for holding now? And what can go right under each scenario? What can go wrong? So let's start with, why does Brentwood want to exit now?
Well, I think like Braden said, the market is just there. I mean, there's a lot of interest in people owning those types of restaurants. And like you said, they don't know how long it's going to last if they wait another year or two, if that interest is still going to be there. And so it's just kind of a get out ahead while you can type of scenario.
Right. Brentwood, they also said in mid-2012, almost 5 years after the initial investment, Brentwood started considering an exit option. It says the average hold period for Brentwood's portfolio companies was about 6.5 years, compared to 3 to 5 years for typical private equity firms. So apparently, in the course of their history in business, they would typically buy and then get out after, 6.5 years. They were at about the 5-year mark anyway. So if they went IPO and it took a year to kind of gauge interest and do the underwriting and the syndicate, they would be out at their typical 6-year window anyway. So it just seems like that was Brentwood's business model, was typically to get in, improve, and get out after 6 years anyway. So that was kind of keeping with what they've always done.
Yeah, and along with that, it talked about how they, like this company, the Zoes, it grew a lot faster than any of the other companies they had in the past. Just like how fast
Right.
their revenues were increasing. So I think that was probably a big part of it too, how fast they're growing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Sarah, anything you'd add?
That's the points I had thought about.
Okay. What are some reasons for holding now? I mean, I think just the obvious one is that it's doing really well as a company. The trajectory as far as 2011 versus 2012, where they were headed in 2013, their same-store sales numbers were really good. They're just a very strong and profitable company. So there's not necessarily a rush to go and sell.
Sorry.
Also, with that,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the case, it talked about how they're still having double-digit growth. I mean, I don't think they're anywhere near kind of plateauing and just kind of being done growing. And so I I think if they just hold it, it's just gaining more and more worth over the next couple of years, even though it does kind of go against that business model, like you said, to hold and then sell after 5 or 6 years, whatnot. I think it's kind of a unique situation, and it's just, I mean, there's no point in selling, I guess, necessarily now, except the market's hot and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he also made the point that he wasn't sure about the IPO because even though they've been growing, they still weren't as like Noodles and Company, and so he wasn't sure if the IPO would be successful because of the size.
Right.
They weren't quite big enough.
I mean, they could
And so
always
holding would allow them some time to do that.
choose to do an IPO some other, like in a year.
There's
Yeah.
also the option that it talked about where they could do a sale of the minority of the stakes and then to like a financial sponsor, and then like in 2 or 3 years do an IPO. Now I was saying like they could have their cake and eat it too, you know.
Mhm.
But there's always that option as well.
Was that the option where they can like test the waters? It was saying.
No, that was it's not the same thing.
Oh.
This they would wait a few years, I guess, but they would. I didn't really completely understand it, but they'd sell It says pursue the sale of a minority stake in Zoes to a financial sponsor, followed by an IPO in 2 or 3 years' time. It says this idea, which was raised by a couple of Zoes P suitors, was not without its merits. A partial sale would allow Brentwood to recoup some of its investments now, or retaining upside on its remaining stake. It might also benefit Brentwood's current fundraising efforts as investors looked favorably on a PE firm's ability to realize proceeds on all investments. And so, yeah, I think that's.
So, Andrew, you were thinking when it says to gauge interest, that's the IPO route, where typically an underwriter would go and do what's called a roadshow, where they would go and see institutional investors to gauge their interest in the company's shares. So they would go to like a Fidelity or Vanguard or some of these, Goldman Sachs. They would go and basically see if these people are interested in putting and owning Zoe's, stock in their portfolios. So that's the IPO route. Okay, let's go back to question. So why does Brentwood want to exit? We kind of discussed that. What are some reasons for holding now? We kind of went over that the company's heading in the right direction. They've got a healthy balance sheet. What can go right under each scenario? What can go wrong? I mean, I think that what can go wrong is simply that they could have some sort of occurrence in their business that basically causes them to, if they have negative years, if same-store sales go down, if, all of a sudden they have some sort of stain or black eye that happens, now they're not a public company, and going public or selling it or, could basically be more of a challenge because then they have some sort of baggage associated with it or something. That doesn't seem likely, though, based on their model. You could also get a huge sell-off in the market, like in 2008, and then people just aren't willing to, if people aren't buying stocks, then their IPO wouldn't really gauge a whole lot of interest.
So I think another thing that could go right and wrong. So if they held on, which ones did you go over? Did you go over
which can go right and which can go wrong? We just kind of talked about what can go wrong, but you can kind of address either.
Well, I mean, and so let's say they sold the IPO. I think what could go right is the case study said they could do like typical IPOs are like 21 times the valuation or whatever. So, I mean, if they were able to reach that, if the excitement was there and everything went well, I mean, they could end up making a ton of money. But if they go wrong and no one has that interest or kind of that excitement over the restaurants isn't there anymore, I mean, they could end up not making hardly anything. And then what could go right with selling it to a private firm, whatnot. I mean, I think it still said a typical sell is like 10 or 11 times their revenue for the EBITDA or whatever. But then something could go wrong, like you said, if they sold it and then that company ended up going public with it and making a lot of money. I mean, they just would lose. Like, I mean, sure, yeah, they got good money for it, but they could have had a lot more. And then the last one, if they do keep it, I mean, they have the potential to grow exponentially over the next few years and really kind of get up with the big boys and be a big company. But if they do also want to hold on to it and grow, they also have the possibility of just kind of being stagnant and not growing. Like, they can't predict just how much they're going to grow and what the market's going to be like in a year or two.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of those assessments. Anything else you'd add?
I think one of you guys might have already mentioned this, but one of the risks involved, like one of the downsides, is that if they try to do the IPO and it fails, it said they'll be kind of viewed as is tainted, and their valuation will be hurt. So I think that's a big one.
That's how I kind of felt. The IPO was like a one shot. If it goes bad, it goes bad, and everything else will be affected.
Yeah.
Okay. All things to consider. Okay. Last question. How much is Zoe's worth under each option? Discuss with each other how you got your answers as a group. Come up with consensus of what Zoe's is worth. So I guess under the IPO option, what it's worth is what people are willing to pay for the shares. So that's kind of a tough one to answer, because the share price is determined by the level of interest that you get with the investors, with your institutional investors and whoever else wants to invest. So it's really not anything more than what someone's willing to pay for it. I think the private firm one was like so many times EBITDA, wasn't it? Do you guys remember?
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
It was like 10 times or 11 times.
Yeah, I think that was what Andrew just said.
It's like 8 or 10 times EBITDA, I think, was what the private firms typically sell for.
It's 8.
Was it 8%?
18?
Excuse me?
I think it was between 8 and 13.
Right. Okay. Okay, so, I mean, that's kind of what the private firm would go. And then I guess the third one would be, what would it be worth if it waited? I guess that's really determined by what it says here. By August 2013, Zoe's was on track to finish with store count revenues and adjusted EBITDA of 102 units, 116 million, 11 million respectively. So, I mean, that kind of gives you an idea of what the weighting would provide in terms of value.
It's on here that the IPO could be 21 times.
21 times EBITDA?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really good. Okay. All right.
Well, I think the second part of does that make sense? Like how one can be a lot lower than the other. And I think that ties into what you were saying, Jason, how in the market and stocks, it's all just about appearance and kind of speculation and kind of like just it doesn't really make sense how people get the value for companies. I mean, when they're buying stock, it's just they want it, then they're willing to pay so much, and if it's too high, then they're not going to buy it. And so I think with going with the private, I mean, I see it makes sense in some realms just because it's quicker, it's easier, and you're still getting that 7 to 13 times your EBITDA. So, I mean, it makes sense where they get their different valuations from and how it would make sense going one with the other.
Yeah, I think the risk is a lot different. Having a buyer, I mean, there's not so much risk right there. You know, you're going to be able to get out and what the value is going to be. With the other two, with the waiting and with the IPO, there's just a lot of risk on if it's going to go good or what the actual value is going to be. You have to wait and see.
It's quick too. It happens in like a few months rather than like a year.
Yeah. Yeah, all good points. What difference did you observe in the valuation based on who buys the company? Does this make any sense? Discuss as a group. We kind of talked about this. The valuations are far different if you went through like a private firm versus if you went to the market, if you will, through like an IPO process. An IPO process could provide you significantly greater value in the fact that they're going to mean it's possible to get much higher valuation than your private firm, for example. And I guess the reason why is basically because the market is driven by emotion. So they're going to base, if they're high on it, then they're willing to buy, and it's just going to drive the price up. Any other comments on that? And then why would anyone sell to a financial buyer instead of an IPO? And Braden, you kind of touched on this. The biggest reason I think is the feasibility. It's like what, 3 months versus like a year.
Yeah.
So any other reasons why anyone would sell to a financial buyer instead of an IPO?
What was that?
What would be the reason to sell to a financial buyer instead of an IPO? You had kind of touched on the timetable. Would there be any other reason?
Like you guys said, like it's not like 21 times like the valuation, but it's like it's still you still get the 8 to 13%, and there's a lot less risk.
Yeah.
And I think also in there, it talked about how there can be kind of like a bidding war if you get enough of those firms to be interested in it and kind of show your growth and potential. I mean, you still have the opportunity to go above that. I think that's just like an average valuation that those firms typically make. But I mean, if two of them get at it, I mean, it could go all the way up to 18 or 19, let's say. So I think there's still possibility to grow, get more out of those than one would initially think.
And I don't think it's in this case so much, but I think that if a firm just needed to get out of it would be an easier way to just to get out because it is faster and things. So I think that'd be another reason to look at it, just not for valuation.
Anything else? I think my internet's cutting in and out. I may have lost you guys for a sec there.
Yeah, you took off for a second. You saw that.
Oh. I don't know. I thought maybe, like, my family just tunes me out, so I thought maybe that was happening here. So, okay. Anything else?
I don't think so.
I think
All
we
right.
did covered it.
So, do you want to hand out assignments, Brayden? Why don't you hand out assignments for the next phase?
How about what we do is the questions that you took last time,
Okay.
we just like kind of like shift down. So I think I took 5 and 6. So I'll take 7, 8, 9 this time.
I'll do
Jason
1 and 2.
1 and 2. And Sarah would you take 5 and 6, Sarah? I don't remember.
Well, I don't remember which ones I did. Which ones did you do, Andrew? You're on mute.
Sorry. I did the summary, and I think I did 1 and 2.
Okay. So I'll do 5 and 6.
And Andrew, you'll do 3 and 4.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Sounds like a plan.
Mind waiting for a little bit? I gotta run out and do some things.
That's
Oh, I'm probably not going to get to mine until this afternoon or evening tonight as well. Okay.
All right. We'll see everybody Wednesday, I guess.
All right.
Good. See ya.
See ya. Bye.